The Western Front was a front of the Red Army, one of the Red Army fronts during World War II. The Western Front was created on the 22nd of June 1941 from the Western Special Military District. The first front commander was Dmitry Pavlov. The western boundary of the front in June 1941 was 470 kilometers long, from the southern border of Lithuania to the Pripyat River and the town of Włodawa. It connected with the adjacent northwestern front, which extended from the Lithuanian border to the Baltic Sea, and the southwestern front in the Ukraine. Operational history. The 1939 partition of Poland according to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact established a new western border with no permanent defense installations, and the army deployment within the front created weak flanks. At the outbreak of war with Germany, the Western Special Military District was, in accordance with Soviet pre-war planning, immediately converted into the Western Front, under the district's commander, Army General Dmitry Pavlov. The main forces of the Western Front were concentrated forward along the frontier, organized in 3 armies. To defend the Bialystok salient, the front fielded the 10th Army, under Lieutenant General Konstantin Dmitrievich Golubev, supported by the 6th Mechanized Corps and 13th Mechanized Corps, under Major Generals Mikhail Georgievich Katskarevich and Petr Nikolaevich Akyustin. On 10th Army's left flank was 4th Army, under Lieutenant General Alexander Andreevich Gorobkov, supported by the 14th Mechanized Corps, under Major General Stepan Ilyich Oborin, and on the right the 3rd Army, under Lieutenant General Vasily Ivanovich Kuznetsov, supported by the 11th Mechanized Corps, under Major General Dmitry Karpovich Mostovenko. To the rear were 13th Army, under Lieutenant General Petr Mikhailovich Filatov. This army initially existed as a headquarters unit only, with no assigned combat forces. Among forces of frontal designation were the 2nd Rifle Corps, 21st Rifle Corps, 44th Rifle Corps, 47th Rifle Corps, 50th Rifle Division, 4th Airborne Corps Alexei Semenovich Adolf at Minsk, and the 58th, 61st, 63rd, 64th and 65th Fortified Regions. Mechanized forces in reserve included the 20th Mechanized Corps under Major Generals Andrei Grigorovich Nikitin at Minsk and the 17th Mechanized Corps, under Major General Mikhail Petrovich Petrov, slightly further forward at Slonim. Altogether, on the 22nd of June, the Western Special Military District fielded 671,165 men, 14,171 guns and mortars, 2,900 tanks and 1,812 combat aircraft. The Western Front was on the main axis of attack by the German Army Group Center, commanded by Field Marshal Fedor von Bock. German plans for Operation Barbarossa called for Army Group Center's 2nd Panzer Group under Colonel General Heinz Guderian to attack south of Brest, advance through Slonim and Baranovichi, turning northeast towards Minsk where it would be met by Colonel General Hermann Hoth's 3rd Panzer Group, which would attack Vilnius, to the north of the Bialystok salient, and then turn southeast. In addition to the 2 panzer groups, Army Group Center also included Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge's 4th Army and Colonel General Adolf Strauss' 9th Army. Air support was provided by Field Marshal Albert Kesselring's Luftflotte II, which contained more than half the German aircraft committed to the attack on the Soviet Union. Defeat on the frontiers 22 to 28 June. The war started disastrously for the Western Front with the Battle of Bialystok-Minsk. The German 9th and 4th Armies of Army Group Center penetrated the border north and south of the Bialystok salient. The front's tanks and aviation at airfields were annihilated by German airstrikes. Soviet command and control suffered almost complete breakdown. Worst hit was 4th Army, which failed to establish communications both with headquarters above and below it. Attempts to launch a counter-attack with 10th Army on the 23rd of June were unsuccessful. That same day the German 3rd Panzer Group captured Vilnius after outflanking 3rd Army. On the 24th of June Pavlov again attempted to organize a counterattack, assigning his Deputy Lieutenant General Ivan Vasilovich Bolden the command of 6th and 11th Mechanized Corps and 6th Cavalry Corps, commanded by Major General Ivan Semenovich Nikitin. With this mobile force, Bolden was to attack northward from the Bialystok region towards Grodno to prevent encirclement of Soviet forces in the salient. This attempted counter-attack was also fruitless, almost without any interference from Soviet fighters. Flygerkorps VII's close support aircraft were able to break the backbone of Western Front's counter-attack at Grodno. 6th Cavalry Corps was so badly mauled by this aerial onslaught against its columns that it was unable to deploy for attack. Jagdgeschwader 53's Hermann Neuhoff recalled, "We found the main roads in the area heavily congested with Russian vehicles of all kinds, but no fighter opposition and very little flak. We made one firing pass after another and caused terrible destruction on the ground. Literally everything was ablaze by the time we turned for home." Quote, "This air operation continued until nightfall on the 24th of June, resulting in 105 tanks reportedly destroyed by German aircraft. Particularly successful attacks were made by the Dornier 17s of KG-2. In effect, Pavlov's counter-attack was completely routed. Of 6th Mechanized Corps' 12 tanks, only about 200 reached their assembly areas due to air attacks and mechanical breakdowns, and even they ran out of fuel by the end of the day. The same fate awaited the 243 tanks of 11th Mechanized Corps, ordered to attack towards Grodno on the 25th of June. 6th Cavalry Corps suffered 50% casualties and its commander, Nikitin, was captured. The attempted attack allowed many Soviet forces to escape from the Bialystok region towards Minsk, but this brought only temporary relief, with both the German 2nd and 3rd Panzer Groups racing towards Minsk on Western Front's southern and northern flanks. A new encirclement threatened. In the evening of the 25th of June, the German 47th Panzer Corps cut between Slonim and Volkovisk, forcing the attempted withdrawal of troops in the salient to avoid encirclement and opening the southern approaches to Minsk. Pavlov dispatched orders to disengage and withdraw into new defenses behind the Shara River, but the few units receiving the orders were unable to break contact with the enemy. Hounded by constant air attacks, Pavlov's forces fled eastward on foot, the bridges over the Shara destroyed by air attacks. Most of 10th Army was not able to cross the river. Further east, 13th Army, which had received orders to assemble various withdrawing forces into the defense of Minsk, had its headquarters ambushed by German spearheads and its defense plans captured. Pavlov then ordered his 20th Mechanized and 4th Airborne Corps, until then held in reserve, to halt the Germans at Slutsk. However, 20th Mechanized Corps had only 93 older tanks and 4th Airborne had to deploy on foot from lack of aircraft. Neither proved any threat to the advancing 2nd Panzer Group. On the 27th of June 1941, German 2nd and 3rd Panzer Groups striking from south and north linked up near Minsk, surrounding and eventually destroying the Soviet 3rd, 10th and 13th Armies, and portions of the 4th Army, in total about 20 divisions, while the remainder of the 4th Army fell back eastwards toward the Berezina River. On 28 June 1941, the 9th and 4th German armies linked east of Bialystok, splitting the encircled Soviet forces into two pockets, a larger Bialystok pocket containing the Soviet 10th Army and a smaller Novgorodic pocket. In the first 18 days of the war, Western Front had suffered 417,790 casualties, lost 9,427 guns and mortars, 4,799 tanks and 1,777 combat aircraft, and practically ceased to exist as a military force. The front commander general of the army, Dmitry Pavlov, and the front staff were recalled to Moscow, but they were accused of intentional disorganization of defense and retreat without battle, sentenced as traitors, and executed. The families of the traitors were repressed according to NKVD Order No. 00486. This order dealt with families of traitors of motherland. Western Front reorganized the 28th of June, the 2nd of July. Furious over the loss of Minsk on the 28th of June, Stalin replaced the disgraced Pavlov with Colonel General Andrei Ivanovich Yeryomenko as commander of Western Front. Arriving at front headquarters at Mogilev on morning the 29th of June, Yeryomenko was faced with the daunting task of restoring order to the Western Front's defenses. To accomplish this task he had initially only the remnants of 4th and 13th Armies, of which the former had been reduced to the equivalent of a division in strength. On the 1st of July he ordered 13th Army to fall back to the Berezina River and defend the sectors between the towns of Kokolnitsa, Borisov and Brodets. Further south, 4th Army were to defend the Berezina from Brodets through Svizlik to Bobruisk. To reinforce the front's defenses, the elite 1st Moscow Motor Rifle Division was rushed from Moscow Military District to Borisov. This division, commanded by Colonel Yakov Grigorovich Kryzer, was at full strength with 2 motorized regiments, 1 tank regiment and 229 tanks. However, by that date Yeryomenko's defense line on the Berezina had already been rendered obsolete by Guderian's panzer divisions. On the 29th of June, 3rd Panzer Division captured a bridgehead at Bobruisk from 4th Army's 47th Rifle Corps, and on the 30th of June 4th Panzer Division seized the railroad bridge at Svizlik from 4th Airborne Corps, cutting off 1th Corps, 3 brigades and most of the 20th Mechanized Corps. Then on the 2nd of July Stalin appointed Semyon Konstantinovich Timoshenko, Marshal of the Soviet Union and People's Commissar for Defense, to command the Western Front, with Yeryomenko and Marshal Semyon Budyonny as his deputies. At the same time Stalin transferred 4 armies, 19th Army, 20th Army, 21st Army and 22nd Army, from Marshal Budyonny's group of reserve armies to Western Front. After a telephone conversation with Timoshenko, Stalin added a 5th Reserve Army, the weak 16th Army, as well. Timoshenko's orders were to defend the western Dvina River Dnieper River line. To this end the front deployed on its northern flank 22nd Army, under Lieutenant General Philip Afanasьevich Urshakov, to defend the sector from Sebez southward to the west and Dvina, and then south along that river from north of Polotsk to Beshenkovichi, south of 22nd Army. 20th Army, under Lieutenant General Pavel Alexeyevich Kurochkin, was to defend the gap between the rivers from Beshenkovichi on the west and Dvina to Shlav on the Dnieper, supported by 5th Mechanized Corps, under Major General Ilya Prokofovich, and 7th Mechanized Corps, under Major General Vasily Ivanovich Vinogradov. 19th Army, under Lieutenant General Ivan Stepanovich Konev, that time regrouping northward from the Kiev region, was to defend the Vitebsk region to the rear of 22nd and 20th Armies. 19th Army included 20 23rd Mechanized Corps under Major General Mikhail Akimovich Myazanov. On the front's southern flank, 21st Army under Lieutenant General Vasily Filipovich Gerasimenko, including 25th Mechanized Corps under Major General Seaman Moiseyevich Krivoshin, was to defend the sector from Rogachev to Richitsa. The remnants of 4th and 13th Armies were to fall back and regroup at the Soch River in 21st Army's rear. In early July, Stalin relieved Gorobkov, the commander of 4th Army, and had him executed for treason. He was replaced by Colonel Leonid Mikhailovich Sandalov. Finally, the 16th Army, under Lieutenant General Mikhail Fedorovich Lukin, was kept in reserve in the Smolensk region. German advance to the Dnieper 2–9 July. The Western Front had been given a brief respite to erect new defenses while the Germans reduced the pockets created during the Bialystok-Minsk battles. With the Minsk pocket nearly digested, the German panzer groups resumed their offensive against Western Front on the 2nd of July. On the front's northern flank, the advance of Hoth's forces were hampered by poor weather. 57th Motorized Corps made the best progress, but encountered heavy resistance from Soviet 22nd Army's 62nd Rifle Corps on the approaches to Polotsk, which led the German Corps commander, Adolf Friedrich Kuntgen, to reroute his 19th Panzer Division northward to Disna on the southern bank of the western Dvina. 39th Motorized Corps, hindered by poor road conditions and resistance from Soviet 20th Army and 5th and 7th Mechanized Corps, in 2 days only advanced as far as Lepel. Further south, Borisov, defended by the remnants of 13th Army and the Borisov Tank School, fell to 18th Panzer Division of 2nd Panzer Group XXXXVII Motorized Corps on the 2nd of July. The Germans capturing the road bridge intact despite Yeryomenko's personal instructions that it be destroyed. Timoshenko was instructed by the Stavka to restore the situation with Kreis's 1st Moscow Motor Rifle Division. XXXXVI Motorized Corps also captured a bridgehead across the Berezina on the 2nd of July when the SS Motorized Division Das Reich captured Pogost, but were then for 2 days hindered by 13th Army and 4th Army's 4th Airborne and 20th Mechanized Corps. On the southern flank, the remnants of 4th Army's rifle divisions were only able to offer light resistance to the German 24th Motorized Corps. Instead, the attackers were repeatedly halted by destroyed bridges at the Berezina, Ola, Dobozna and Drat rivers. Kreis launched his counter-attack against the German bridgehead at Borisov on the 3rd of July, but the defenders had been forewarned by radio intercepts and air reconnaissance, and with the superior tactics beat back this isolated Soviet attack. Defeated, Kreis accordingly withdrew behind the Nasha River and fought a fighting withdrawal towards Orsha, where it was aided by the arrival of 20th Army. Also on the 3rd of July, the spearheads of 24th Motorized Corps reached the rain-swollen Dnieper, with the 3rd Panzer Division arriving at the river north of Rogachev and 4th Panzer Division advancing to Baikov. By nightfall, Western Front could report that remnants of 4th and 13th Armies had been able to retreat across the Dnieper. However, hardly anything of 3rd and 10th Armies remained. Moreover, parts of 13th Army and 17th Mechanized Corps were still west of the Dnieper. Accordingly, Timoshenko ordered his 21st Army to shore up its defenses along the river and help the withdrawal by sending out forces to spoil the German advance. On the 4th of July, 19th Panzer Division seized a bridgehead across the western Dvina at Disna from the defending 51st Rifle Corps of Soviet 22nd Army, where it was reinforced by the German 18th Motorized Division. The Smolensk Pocket. The front took part in the fierce Battle of Smolensk, which managed to disrupt the German blitzkrieg for 2 months. The Germans successfully encircled and destroyed large parts of Soviet 16th, 19th, and 20th Armies. During July, the Western Front's area of responsibility was reduced by the formation of the new Central and Reserve Fronts, stiffening Soviet resistance in the center, convinced Hitler to put a temporary halt to the advance towards Moscow and divert Army Group Center's armor towards Leningrad and Kiev. The Soviet Darkovshkina offensive. On the 17th of August, Western Front launched an offensive towards Darkovshkina as part of a larger Soviet attempt to counter-attack. However, despite some local successes, the offensive failed to breach the German defenses and the offensive was called off the 10th of September. Newly promoted Colonel General Ivan Konev took over command in September when Timoshenko was transferred south to restore the situation in the then ongoing Battle of Kiev. The Vyazma Pocket. On the 2nd of October, German forces resumed their advance on Moscow with the launch of Operation Typhoon. The Western Front again suffered immense losses when large parts of its forces were encircled near Vyazma. Assault on Moscow. When Zhukov took over on the 10th of October, the Soviet Reserve Front had just been disbanded and its forces incorporated into Western Front. But given the pounding that Soviet forces had suffered, the force numbered only 90,000 men. 16th Army under Konstantin Rokossovsky held at Volokholamsk, and General L.A. Govorov had 5th Army, recently raised from 1st Guards Rifle Corps, and soon to include the 32nd Rifle Division at Mozhaisk. The 43rd Army was under General K.D. Golubev at Maloyaroslavets, and the 49th Army was near Kaluga under General I.G. Zakharin. 49th Army had been formed in August 1941 and initially assigned to Reserve Front. On the 1st of September 1941, 49th Army comprised 194th, 220th, and 248th Rifle Divisions, and 4th Division of People's Militia. Meanwhile, 33rd Army was forming at Naro-Fominsk under General Lieutenant M.G. Yefremov, and was to be assigned to Zhukov's command. The Soviets just managed to halt the German advance in the Battle of Moscow, leading to further furious fighting in the battles of Rzhev just to the west. In May 1942, the Front's air forces became the 1st Air Army. Later operations in World War II. The Front appears to have controlled the 3 armies, the 5th Army, 33rd Army, and 10th Guards Army, which formed the assault force in the Battle of Smolensk. On the 1st of August 1943, the 70th Rifle Corps was listed on the Soviet Order of Battle as a headquarters with no troops assigned, directly subordinate to the Front. On the 24th of April 1944, the front was divided into the 2nd Belarusian Front and 3rd Belarusian Front. Status today. The Russian ground troops continue the Soviet Army's organizational arrangement of having military districts that have both a wartime territorial administration role and the capability to generate formation headquarters to command fronts. This was emphasized by reports of a Moscow military district exercise in April 2001, when the district's units were to be divided into 2 groups, one operating for the Western Front and the other for the wartime military district. It appears likely that the Western Front is still an active formation held within the headquarters of the Moscow military district. Plans probably call for it to be mobilized as part of the Russia-Belarus regional grouping of troops. Commanders during World War II. General of the Army Dmitry Pavlov, Marshal Semyon K. Timoshenko, Lt. General Ivan S. Konev, General Georgy K. Zhukov, Colonel General V.D. Sokolovsky.